Journey to the Heartland, written by Sophie Jupia Posey, narrated by Delio Pera. The young man owned a guitar as black as eons-long despair. A black, ebony guitar with lacquer the color of deep secrets and betrayal. A gift given to him by his grandfather. The guitar was a legacy of the Villanueva family. No one knew how it came to be theirs.
Aventuro, play it. Do not use it,
his grandfather used to say.
It has a soul, like you and me.
Aventuro listened, and he played it till the strings dug permanent grooves in his fingers and his blisters popped and calluses formed. The guitar bound itself to him. He could play it like a virtuoso. The guitar had a rich, deep voice, and when he listened just right, he could hear ethereal voices singing in unadulterated joy. But the guitar always left him wanting, just a little. Rapture, ever so close, yet just out of reach. Aventuro was missing a little bit of his music's soul. He played his very own chanson d'amour, serenading his muse, worshipping her and basking in the gifts she gave him. Even though he was missing something, he wouldn't trade his guitar away for the world. He was enamored with the spirit of the guitar, his guitar, and he would not give it up. One day, Aventuro was plucking at his guitar, slipping indolently into sleep, phantoms of a tune floating gently in and out of his conscience, and one of those fleeting wisps reached out and tenderly brushed his face.
Aventuro, take me away from here. Take me back to my source. My Aventuro, free me and I will be yours forever.
That voice, it was hers, the guitar's, but she had never spoken so clearly before. If he didn't focus, he could see her from the corner of his eye, a woman of gossamer reality, her large, dark almond eyes overpowering the rest of her narrow face, even her rosebud lips, soft pink like a seashell. Her hands reached for him, tapered fingers, flowy lace sleeves, whipping at his face like foam.
Take me across the sea. Take me to my tree.
When Aventuro woke up, he thought this was the most bizarre dream he'd ever had, but he could not deny the call of the mysterious woman. The smell of the sea was in his nose, in his heart. He had to go and take the guitar with him. He didn't know where, but he'd always wanted to leave his island, the rugged, rustic Cadalagna. Now he would finally escape the eyes of his parents, who were disappointed his only aspiration was to make music, and the townspeople, who thought him odd as well. Aventuro said goodbye to his family and ventured on his journey with nothing but his guitar. He boarded the Sea Mistress and was swept away to a different world. He traveled for what seemed like forever, days merging together with sun and moon chasing each other again and again amidst stars that seemed never to disappear from the sky. The further out to sea the ship went, the pinker the sky became, with clouds melting into soft whips, crisscrossing the sky in a rhapsody of harsh fantasy. Aventuro talked with his fellow sailors, and they laughed at his absurd journey. They laughed and joked, but they let him play guitar for them. When they heard him play, they became silent at once. Aventuro's music arched and flowed its way to them in a sinuous wave of sorrow, elation, and yearning beyond mortal realms. They never teased him after that. They never let him help on deck either. He was isolated, just as he'd been on Cadalagna. But he kept playing, for them and for himself, his black guitar, the only dark object in sight. The woman didn't show herself to him again, but he heard her voice in his ear, imploring him to keep going. Her whispers and warm presence kept him company. The sea vessel went past many an island and continent, but none seemed right. Then, one day when the sailors cried,
Land! Land ho!
Aventuro looked, and he knew. The coast presented itself, gnarled and twisted as an old crone's hand. The earth was black, black as pitch, black as the shadowiest corners of hell, black as his faithful guitar. This was the place. Now he had to find the tree, her tree. When he set foot on land, he felt like an insect scuttling across a barren desert, dry and hard as a tambourine. The townsfolk scurried around, heads down, frowns on their faces, working hard, incessant like insects themselves. When he played his guitar to get a room at a local inn, he was chased out. He kept asking for the special tree, but couldn't get answers. "Where is the tree?" he asked his guitar, strumming and strumming as he lay on the ground behind a shack. She did not reply. He kept asking and asking until one day he saw some men building wooden houses, black as never-ending cruelty. He hadn't seen any black buildings until then. He asked them where they got the wood. Silly boy, they called him. Didn't he know about the tree of luck, standing since before they were born? It had been a relic of magic and hadn't been touched for centuries out of respect. But a prospector had come and said that using the tree of luck would imbue whatever was built with magic and good fortune. So, some of the townsfolk, wanting nothing more than extra money, closed their eyes to the old myths and tore bark off the tree. Some made things from the bark. The bigger the object, the more luck it had, so it was said. Some young men even went so far as to carve out flutes from the tree, hoping it would make them lucky with reluctant girls. So when they saw Aventuro's guitar, they grinned and complimented him on his savoir-faire. He must truly be lucky, they said, as no one had ever made a black guitar from that tree. The guitar quivered in Aventuro's hands, and he quivered too, with rage. What would happen if they took too much from the tree? Wouldn't it die? Wouldn't other people be cheated out of their chance to enjoy some of the tree's luck? But the townsfolk only shrugged and said at least they'd be able to enjoy the tree during their lifetimes. Aventuro, rage stifling his gait, walked into an inn where he'd been chased out before and asked for the steward of the town. He would refuse to leave until he got the answers he needed. The innkeeper sneered at him and told him he would wait for a long time. Hours melted into days, and Aventuro refused to leave, staying in the exact spot he'd taken on a rickety, ale-stained stool. The innkeeper tried chasing him off, but no one helped, and Aventuro obstinately stayed. Finally, the innkeeper gave him a flagon of ale, hoping that would satisfy him. Aventuro drank it to slake his thirst, but when he did, time became molasses, as did his wits. He wandered out of the inn and into the countryside in a daze, ground and sky whirling in his vision, sounds and scents clashing over and over in psychedelic waves. Snippets of past musics, old tales, and stranger lands became a potpourri of sensations and memories. Aventuro fell at last in a broken down shed, his heart beating fast, while his guitar moaned plaintively, trying with no success to wake him up. When at last he did awaken, his head still thrummed and beat to a rhythm that was not his. Instinctively, he reached for his guitar, and it nestled perfectly in the crook of his bruised arm. He heard a voice, a weary, sad voice, singing broken melodies, and he knew it wasn't his muse. A different pain, a different longing coated this voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Where are you?" he asked. A shadow, the color of dusk, floated past him, a shadow of a woman's sadness.
"I was Edith. Please, all I want is Philip. We have been apart for centuries. Until I find him, I can belong nowhere.
Aventuro asked how she'd become a ghost. Centuries ago, she and Philip had met and fallen instantly in love. But the night before their wedding, he'd fallen ill with a terrible sickness that robbed him of his voice and eyesight. Edith had taken him to every wise man on the island, but they couldn't heal him. Then, one night, Edith was visited by a witch doctor, new to the island. The witch doctor promised a cure, thereby assuring their previously delayed wedding. She told Edith to come back in a fortnight, but when Edith came back, she found her Philip in the thrall of the witch doctor. Instead of a cure, she'd given him a love potion. Philip adored his jailer, and Edith was cursed by the witch for trying to break them apart. For years, Edith's torture was to see Philip and the witch together while she lingered in this realm as a ghost. When the witch tired of Philip and he started breaking free from her love spell, she turned him into a ghost as well, left to wander the island and beyond, still without sight and without voice. Edith had heard rumors of the healing and bridging power of music, and she spent years remembering a song she used to sing to Philip, a song her mother used to sing, and her mother's mother, and on and on. But her feeble ghost voice wasn't enough to sing it so Philip could hear it from his distant wanderings. If she could find a way to vocalize that song with strength, perhaps Philip would hear and he would come to her.
Here is the song as I remember it,
Edith said to Aventuro.
I see a musician's soul in you. Please, help if you can.
Aventuro nodded and listened as she haltingly murmured her song, a relic of distant memories. Again and again he had her sing it, and he strummed with her, bridging the gaps when she faltered, improvising and pulling himself so far into the music it was as if he'd been a little girl, lulled to sleep with that melody, saved by the patience of time. When he'd mastered the song and was sure Edith was ready, they sang together, her with a trembling voice that grew stronger, him quietly singing in support, his guitar the backbone of it all. They sang it 3 times, and the last time a shadow passed Aventuro and mingled with Edith. The song stopped, and Edith and Philip vanished, leaving peace and motes of sunlight behind them. Faintly, Aventuro heard 2 voices whisper, "Thank you," and "I can see."
Where do I go?
He asked quickly.
I need to find the Tree of Luck.
Find the child,
was the response, so quiet he almost missed it. Aventuro spent weeks sleeping on warm, hard ground, scavenging for food, playing music when his brittle fingers had the energy to do it. Everywhere he went, everything looked the same. Dry, unforgiving earth, crystallized in a landscape of desolation and despair. The people looked the same. The sky looked the same. Time itself felt sluggish, trapped in a place where black earth slept balefully. He saw children, but couldn't find the one he needed. He started feeling angry, with his muse and with the ghost couple. Why would no one give him straight answers? Why did everyone give him wide berth? One night, Aventuro was sitting by a creek, having just washed himself as well as he could. The black earth and dust clung to him, even after a bath. When he put on his clothes and reached for his guitar, ever beside him, it wasn't there. Whirling around, Aventuro got on his hands and knees and scouted for it in the dark. He searched around the creek and circled back to his original spot. Glowing green eyes coalesced into a stout, pale body holding his guitar. A child, an ugly, thieving child, stared at him with eyes green as jade, pasty skin bright in the night.
Give my guitar back,
Aventuro growled.
No. Give it or else.
But Aventuro was at a loss. Who, what was this child, and what did it want? What would frighten it? The child laughed.
You can't do anything. I've already been punished.
You? Why?
I wasn't always a child.
Aventuro sat down on the ground, and the child sat down too, still holding the guitar.
I have something you want, and you can give me something I need, but I want you to listen first.
Aventuro begrudgingly listened to the child. It was a he. The child had been an adult, a cobbler with too much idle time and too much humor in him. He played pranks on the townspeople all the time and botched things on purpose because it was funny to him. Even when the Great Famine came, he continued his pranks and did nothing to help other people. Everybody called him a child and avoided his trade. For years, all he heard was selfish like a child, over and over. One day, he woke up and he was a child. Nothing he did could fix it. No apologies, no punishment, no wanderings. The man-child went to the Tree of Luck and tried stealing some bark, but it did not help. But now that Aventuro was here, he could free the child from the curse, because the child knew Aventuro was on a mission.
I don't know what I need to do,
Aventuro said, feeling useless and insignificant as an ant stranded on a mountaintop. The child laughed.
Of course you don't.
But you can get me to the tree,
Aventuro said slowly. The child nodded. So together they trekked across the island, the child playing pranks on Aventuro, melting into shadows and popping back up in front of him, scaring him, stealing his boots when he slept and filling them with rocks, taking the guitar and hiding it in random, dilapidated shacks. Aventuro was ready to strand the child somewhere and continue alone, but he didn't know where the tree was, and deep down, he wanted the child to be cured. The duo finally found the tree. It rose up to the sky, fiercely, angrily, branches cupped in an orb of ebony. Its base overshadowed the size of the sea mistress. Its bark pulsed with streaks of purple and copper if one looked just right, pulsing like a heart about to burst. Huge chunks of emptiness disfigured the tree, and it was black as frigid and cold as the blackness of greed. Aventuro stared at the tree, and the realization hit him like a fell of destiny. He had to let go. He had to free his guitar, his family legacy. It was no longer a Villanueva treasure. His guitar deserved to be free. She needed her maker. The treasure had probably never truly belonged to him in the first place.
Goodbye, my love,
he whispered, and weeping, he gently laid his guitar at the base of the tree. The child beside him groaned and stared at him with wet eyes. Aventuro's guitar shook and shivered as the tree opened like a mighty maw. The trunk flexing and wrapping around the instrument, wood and bark mingling together in a gruesome cacophony. Crunching and crackling, thunderous fury echoed across the plain, making Aventuro and the child cringe. Around him, Aventuro could hear the approach of town lads and their guffaws, incredulous that he could have done something so rash, letting go of his lucky instrument. Aventuro put his head down, mourning the loss of his guitar. He cast an apologetic look at the child. He had failed him too. Suddenly, he felt long, warm hands cup his face and raise his chin. The woman with the voice of tinkling glass. Her huge eyes glittered with mischief, and a wry smile graced her small mouth. She was swathed in diaphanous black robes, espousing her hourglass form in a cloud of ebony. Her long hair flowed over her robes, and she tugged him to her.
You set me free, my Aventuro. Thank you.
She touched the head of the child, who regarded her as a queen. She smiled and backed away as the child's form shimmered and morphed into an adult's body. A tall man, smiles radiating from every pore in his body, stretched and looked at his hands in wonder. He started laughing, and she laughed with him.
You are free. Go and wander beyond this land. Your child's heart does not belong in this realm. Come back when you are wiser.
He hesitated, then winked and galloped off, still laughing, his cackling echoing like merry drums. The woman glanced at the townsfolk, who gaped at her and Aventuro, and she snapped her fingers. The townsfolk jerked into a frantic dance, their movements unnatural and frenzied. Aventuro heard their panting, saw their looks of disbelief, their fruitless struggles to break free. They started to scream, and the woman pulled him close and danced with him, a slow, languorous dance full of affection.
Don't watch, my love,
she said, blocking his view with her body. A chorus of cellos, clarinets, and guitars rang through the air, but it wasn't enough to mask the sound of tearing and squelching and screams that stopped short, gurgling like flooding rivers. It wasn't enough to stop the sudden stench of fresh blood and powerful crackling, like the sounds of muscles and sinews ripping apart all at once. It wasn't enough to stop the scuffling and scrambling on the ground, of feet desperate to get away. Aventuro took a deep breath and tried to lose himself in the music, the feeling of her, the sinuous grace of her dance, the darkness of her eyes, the velvety sureness of her voice. When they finished dancing, Aventuro glanced at the tree. It was mostly whole, but holes and tears still littered the trunk. All the people were gone, leaving nothing but smooth, white bones on the ground. Slowly, they sank into the earth.
It had to be done,
his muse said, grasping him by the waist, her eyes level with his.
I am the Ebony Heartland. Will you help me?
Yes, he answered.
First, I need to be whole again. You giving me the guitar restored so much of me. The maker of it had no terrible intentions, but taking away so much from the tree and taking it away from this island depleted me too much for so long.
She gestured to the tree inside, her form and the tree merging together so Aventuro didn't know if woman or tree talked to him.
The people have taken so much from us. Find all the remains you can of us and bring them back here, no matter how long it takes. When you are done, I will be healed. Then I shall be yours.
Aventuro knew what he had to do. He had to scour the island for all the things that used the tree's bark. He was afraid she had killed all the people in the Heartland, but she had only killed those who had come too close, those who had openly taunted her. For the next couple of years, he traversed one end of the island to the other with an old wagon, talking to people and convincing them to let go of their heirlooms, or the foundations of their homes, or their meager instruments. Some he had to fight, some quietly gave it all up, some asked to leave the Heartland. The woman guided him, letting him know when he was close and how much he still had to go. In the end, the wood filled the entire wagon almost full to bursting. He came back to the tree and she was there, waiting for him, arms outstretched. She smiled at him, radiant as a goddess.
Give it all back to me, my love.
And he did, handing piece after piece of mangled, carved, hewn, or chopped ebony wood. As soon as each piece touched her, the trunk's girth increased, and the more he gave her, the taller the tree grew. The tree creaked and groaned and expanded till it rose far into the sky, a black monument austere as justice. The woman took Aventuro's hands and said,
You have done marvelously. I am now whole. I must fulfill my duty for too long shirked. I give you a final responsibility. It is up to you to nurture and heal the Heartland. Now that I am whole, it can be done. I cannot do it alone. Now that the people cannot rely on my essence, they will find other ways to survive. You need one thing. She reached out her arms, and a gale howled from the heavens, coursing through the tree and traveling to her hands in a swath of pearlescent white and blue.
It molted and pulsed, shifting and coalescing slowly into a guitar. She gave it to Aventuro, and when he touched it, it weighed as much as a passionate whisper.
I will always be with you. Play it. Do not use it. It has a soul like you and me. That soul will awaken my Heartland.
She backed into the tree, and she was sucked into it, flesh becoming bark, hair becoming veins. The ebony of the tree paled in the white blue of Aventuro's guitar. Gnarly branches curved into supple ones. The bark became smooth as serenity. Flowers bloomed, gigantic blossoms of white, scented with the crisp perfume of purity. Aventuro dragged his fingers across the strings, and they sang, with chimes and soft voices mingling into a pleasing harmony that pebbled his skin, his soul. He traveled the Heartland with her blessing, strumming, plucking, sweeping, and tapping on the strings, coaxing every memory and emotion out of him and transferring them to the hard, dry, broken land. He learned the music of living beings and non-living beings, the music of painful solitude and the music of sheer rapture. He learned it, played it, added his own touch. The Heartland blossomed gradually. Some areas he had to go back to more than once to perfect his music, but eventually he covered the entire Heartland with the honesty of his songs, and the land healed and thrived with him. Aventuro became the steward of the Heartland. He helped people survive without greed and taught the few who wanted the joys of music. When he died, he became part of the tree, and so did the guitar. Reunited as one with the force of their love, no one could ever harm the tree again. You've been listening to Journey to the Heartland, written by Sophie Jupia Posey, narrated by Delio Pera.